No, I got this one. You need that to read the fanfic. It's alright. I got it figured out. Oh, nice.
Live?
Yeah.
Someone heard that?
Oh, yeah. Hello, Riku. How's it going? Lextron is just getting her stuff together and she'll be in here in a second. Okay. Oh, hey, Bee. Do you want to come be in this one? Ah, welcome.
Yes, I made it. I was here.
All right. Perfect. Now we can dive back into All the Young Dudes.
All the young dudes.
The greatest fan fiction of Harry Potter ever made.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have to pull it up.
Where did we end up last time with All the Young Dudes? Lupin had just been accepted by the group because he punched Snape, right?
Yeah, and then they did a prank on him.
That's right. They put the stuff in his bed.
In the hole.
Slytherin.
Yep.
Because there was a tunnel that led into the Slytherin's dormitory.
Correct.
If only Harry had known this. Well, there was a tunnel that was like collapsed, remember? I wonder if that's the tunnel.
What do you mean?
Fred and George tell him that there was some tunnel, but it was like collapsed in.
Oh, yeah,
so I wonder
maybe.
if that's the tunnel. And Harry wouldn't have been able to use it anyways. Hey, Katie, how's it going?
All right, I found the next chapter. All right, just wanted to make sure I had it. I don't know why I'm coughing right now.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Take a drink. Bailey decided he wanted to be a part of this today.
Oh, that's fine.
He's been out of too many videos.
He wants to listen to the story.
He always looks so awkward on camera. Have you noticed that? He always like looks away, like, oh.
Bailey, people want to see you. Beatty, people want to see you. Look, see? I think that tunnel collapsed due to the backfiring curse Lockhart performed in that chamber. That's my theory, anyway.
Maybe.
That's a
I
good
think
one.
about that. And hey, Lucas, how's it going? I don't know.
Well, because Fred and George just say that it collapsed. They don't say when. They just said, don't use this one, it's collapsed. So it could have been Lockhart. Or maybe this is...
I guess, depending on how it collapsed, I want to believe that it's that tunnel that they're speaking of.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Because it saves some explaining of why Harry had to use other means to sneak into the Slytherin common room.
This is true. Why they had to just go ahead and use Polyjuice Potion BD.
Well, at that point, they didn't have the Marauders map.
No.
But I mean, like, later on and stuff, when he was
Well, he never had to sneak into the Slytherin common room
Well,
again.
no, but if he had known about that tunnel, don't you think when he was wondering what Malfoy was up to and stuff, he would have...
Oh, in like 6?
Yeah,
Yeah, probably.
that's what I mean.
Probably. This is true.
But okay. So Lupin has finally been accepted by the group.
Yes, and they pulled off their first prank.
They did. And we found out that Lupin very much likes Sirius.
Yes, he likes him a lot.
A lot. Like, more than James likes Sirius. A lot.
More than James likes Sirius. Yes, it seems that he does like him quite a bit, huh, BD?
And the coolest part about this is we got a glimpse into what it's like to transform into a werewolf from Lupin's perspective.
Yeah,
that was done really well.
I thought how she wrote it was insightful, and it wasn't too like disgusting.
No.
It made sense. It kind of seems like that's how Rowling would write it if Rowling wrote it.
That's what I mean. It was done in a way that I think Rowling would have approved. Like, yes, that's how it's done. We'll go with that.
That's how it would feel. I'm sorry, he's just so cute.
And now we get to... I can't look at you right now. The ear gets in my way. And now we get to see what they're going to do now that the Marauders have become the Marauders.
Yes.
What's the next chapter called?
Oh, and also, I found out that plant that's growing outside in my mom's yard, it's rose hips. That's what they use.
Oh.
In the story. To make the powder, the itching powder. My mom has it.
So we can make itching powder.
We could if we wanted to. Yeah, right? Okay.
Wolf whistle. Yes. Now Bailey's getting excited. Like, what are you whistling me for? I'm right here.
No, you can't sit on me. I have to read. You have to sit and listen. That's how this works.
All right.
Okay, are we ready?
I'm ready. I'm excited.
You just like, let's just find out. I want to know. Okay. Bailey wants all the attention.
What's the chapter called?
I'm gonna tell you.
Okay.
Chapter 7, First Year. Marauders. Wednesday, 15th of September, 1971. The next morning, James and Sirius could barely contain their excitement and hurried their dorm mates down to breakfast before any of the other Gryffindors. They were the first students to reach the Great Hall, other than a few Ravenclaws bent over their NEWT revision books with huge mugs of black coffee. Perfect! Sirius beamed at the empty benches. Front row seats! But no one shows up for hours, Peter groaned, half asleep, propped up on his elbows. Oh, cheer up. James poured them all large mugs of tea. Don't you want to see the fruits of our labour? Not at 6 in the morning, Peter replied, slurping his tea. Sirius winced at the sound and pushed a plate toward him. Have some toast and stop whining. Remus took some toast too and cut it into 4 pieces. He spread marmalade onto one quarter, jam onto another, butter on the third, and lemon curd on the last. He ignored the look of amusement Sirius was giving him. Remus had never had so much choice before and was determined to make the most of every meal. Fortunately, they did not have to wait too long before the other students began to trickle in for breakfast. The first Slytherins arrived just as Remus was finishing his toast. 3 boys and 2 girls, 3rd years. They walked over to their table, quite unaware of the 4 eager Gryffindors watching them intently. For a few moments it was as if nothing was different. Sirius sighed with disappointment. But then, the tallest boy shuffled slightly in his seat, rubbing his arm. Another seemed to be looking for something in his pocket, but from Remus's viewpoint he was clearly scratching his leg furiously. The third kept using his wand to rub behind his ear. "It worked," James whispered, breathless with excitement. Even Peter looked cheerful now. As more and more Slytherins filtered in, their problem became more obvious and more hilarious. By 7 o'clock, the Slytherin table was full of squirming, writhing, scratching boys and horrified-looking girls. Amicus Carrow, a burly 6-year, eventually ripped off his robes, his school jumper, and even his tie to claw at his chest, which Remus could see was already red raw. He almost felt sorry for them. But then Snape came in. Whether it was karma or sheer luck, Severus seemed to have reacted particularly badly to the rosehip seeds. He walked in with his head bowed, hair falling over his face, but his nose was still visible and clearly bright red. "Oh, Merlin!" Sirius wheezed, laughing so hard he was holding his stomach. "Tell me we got his face." "Boys, Snivellus!" James yelled out suddenly to get the other boys' attention. Snape spun round, looking up, his hair parted. The left side of his face was covered in an angry red rash, from his temples all the way down to his neck, disappearing under his uniform. His left eye was red too, the lids swollen and irritated. "Looking good!" Sirius crowed, and all 4 boys dissolved into giggles as Snape stormed out of the room. By the time breakfast was over, the entire castle was buzzing with rumours about what exactly had come over the Slytherin boys. Sirius and James looked as though all their Christmases had come at once, and even Peter had cheered up remarkably, reminding them all that he had kept lookout after all, making the venture possible. "It was all Lupin's idea, though," Sirius returned, slapping Remus heartily on the back. What shall we do to celebrate, eh? Exploding snap? Raid the kitchens?" Remus shook Sirius off, smiling politely. "Well, whatever you do, you're doing it without me," he replied. "We've got double detention." "From Slughorn?" "Yeah, and McGonagall, and Flitwick, but that's tomorrow. Then my herbology detention is over the weekend." "Bloody hell, mate," James frowned. "You going for a record or something?" Remus shrugged. He was always being punished at St. Edmund's. All the boys were. Detention didn't bother him, though exploding snap did sound like a lot of fun. "Maybe you'd better get started doing your homework," Sirius said gently. Remus rolled his eyes, getting up from the table. "Come on," he said. "It's Defense Against the Dark Arts first. Thought you two loved that." Later that day, Remus was on his way to his detention with Slughorn when he ran into... Whoops, sorry, that wasn't even Lola. When he ran into Lily Evans, he was perfectly happy to keep walking, but she smiled and fell in step with him. "Hiya, Remus." "Hi." "Are you going to the dungeons?" He nodded. "Me too. I have to tell Slughorn that Severus can't make his detention." "Oh, right." "Did you hear what happened to the Slytherins?" "Yeah." Everyone had heard. It was all they'd been talking about all day, even during lessons. Fortunately, no one had a clue who'd done it yet. It had been a good idea attacking the whole house at once. Who could guess who the target had been? "Crazy, isn't it?" Lily continued. "Poor Sev was allergic to whatever they used. Madame Pomfrey gave him a sleeping draught while the swelling goes down." Remus sniggered without thinking. He glanced at Lily, who was looking at him with reproachful green eyes. She shook his head. "Look, I know he wasn't very nice to you. The other day in potions or on the train. He's a bit of a snob, okay?" Remus snorted. "But I wanted to say sorry," Lily pressed on. "I need to stand up to him more. I shouldn't let him get away with it. He's actually a really nice person when you get to know him." "If you say so." Remus stopped walking. They were outside Slughorn's office now. The door was closed and there were raised voices on the other side. "Horace, whoever it was, they must have been a Slytherin." It was Professor McGonagall. "Who else has the password?" "Why would a Slytherin attack their own house, Minerva?" The potions master sounded very frustrated. "You did say it was only the boys' dorms affected. Perhaps it was one of the girls." "Really? Well, who else? Peeves?" He never enters the common rooms, doesn't enter the dungeons either, come to that. Too frightened of the bloody Baron.
We ought to put a ban on all Zonko's products.
From what Poppy says, it wasn't a Zonko's product. Rose hit from the greenhouses. Lupin felt a trickle of fear run down his spine. If they knew that much, they'd be able to find out. If they knew that much, would they be able to find out who'd done it?
Rose hip, eh? Very clever.
Slughorn actually sounded impressed. McGonagall sighed. I suppose you'd like to blame the Ravenclaws now.
I just wish I'd knew who'd done it,
he sighed heavily.
Perhaps the truth will out. I suppose it does seem more likely that it was one of the Slytherin girls than
a gang of Marauders creeping around into the dungeons under the cloak of night with malicious intent. Remus could hear Slughorn chuckle at that.
Yes, quite.
Now I must be going, McGonagall was saying, her footsteps approaching the door. You will let me know if you catch the culprit? The door swung open. Remus and Lily stepped back guiltily. McGonagall looked down at them through her spectacles. What are 2 Gryffindors doing so far away from the tower? Please, Professor, Remus and I, we were only...
Ah!
Slughorn cut off Lily's nervous rambling.
Lupin, my boy, and Miss Evans, come to offer Snape's apologies, eh? No need, dear girl, no need. With everything going on today, I think we can cancel the boys' detentions for now.
He came to the door and looked down at Remus severely.
Is it understood that there will be no more fighting in my classes, or any classes for that matter,
Yes, Professor. Remus nodded solemnly, trying not to look too pleased.
Excellent,
Slughorn beamed, locking the door to his office.
Then if you'll excuse me, I have some inquiries to make.
Remus and Lily had almost made it to the end of the hall when McGonagall suddenly called out. Mr. Lupin! Remus's heart sank.
Yes, Professor McGonagall?
That isn't to say that your detention with me has been cancelled. Come along, we'll get an early start.
Oh, so close.
He almost had it. McGonagall had him doing lines for an hour. Not too bad, considering that he was used to canings at St. Edmund's. He didn't mind copying and repetition. It was soothing. I will complete all assignments set. Perhaps he'd swallow his pride next time and copy James's homework. Or Peter's if he didn't want to look too suspicious. But he knew that James would eventually want to know why Remus never read the set text, and if he told him, then he was equally sure that James and Sirius would try to get him to explain to McGonagall. Both boys had unerring faith in the teachers of Hogwarts. Remus, however, had never met an adult he'd trusted. She'd sent him back to St. Edmund's at once. What good was an illiterate wizard to anyone? Once his detention was finished, he climbed through the portrait hole and into the common room to find his 3 roommates waiting for him. Peter and James were engaged in a very serious-looking game of chess. Of course the pieces are moving, Remus thought to himself. Everything has to move in this bloody castle. While Sirius was listening to one of his records through a very posh-looking brand new headphones, Remus was dying to have a listen, but he hadn't worked up the courage to ask yet. He sat down next to Sirius quietly. The long-haired boy pulled his headphones off at once and said, "That was quick. Only had one to do in the end."
Wait, headphones? I didn't think electronics worked at Hogwarts. Or are there magic headphones?
Maybe he's bewitched him, like Colin Creevy's camera.
Maybe. Got a tickle in his throat.
I see that.
Okay, that just threw me off. I'm like, what? How you?
Yeah, they shouldn't work.
Yeah, unless he's just that good of a wizard that he somehow bewitched the headphones to work.
I don't know. Oh. Are you good, sir?
I only had to do one in the end, Remus explained. Slughorn let me off. Too busy trying to sort out the itching powder thing.
Sirius grinned broadly, leaning back on the couch with his arms folded under his head.
That prank is just the gift that keeps on giving. Snape was allergic and everything. Remus said, smirking. That ginger girl said he's been in the hospital wing all day. Sirius laughed even louder. His eyes grew bright when he laughed. Remus had never seen anyone exhibit such pure joy. It made you want to punch him and be his friend at the same time. Which ginger girl? James looked up suddenly. Checkmate! Peter cried. You know, the annoying one, Evans. I don't think she's annoying. Okay, Remus shrugged. Let's not talk about girls. Sirius rolled his eyes. This might be the most important day of our lives. This is the day we become legends, the day our friendship was forged in the fires of itching powder. They don't know it was us, do they? Peter asked nervously, tidying away his chess set. Remus shook his head. Slughorn reckons it was a Slytherin girl. We're a gang of marauders. Marauders! Sirius sat up suddenly. That's it! Raise your glasses, boys! We don't have glasses, James replied, amused. Well, just pretend. Sirius shook his head irritably. From this day forward, we are the Marauders. He said this with such a dramatic flourish that it could only be followed with a stunned silence. James was grinning, Peter glancing at him for direction, not quite understanding what was going on. Remus burst out laughing. What sort of Ponzi gang name is that?
So there it is. That's how the Marauders became the Marauders.
There it is. Slughorn. See? Slughorn. He's the best.
Slughorn gave him the idea. Well, technically McGonagall. McGonagall's the one who said.
McGonagall did say it.
Called them the Marauders.
That's all right. That's true. All right. McGonagall. Good old McGallion McGonagall.
Yeah. I love, like, Sirius and James's interactions, though. I can't help but think that would be Fred and George. We're following them more often.
Yeah.
It reminds me of them so much.
Well, and I think McGonagall mentions that like multiple times in the text, like in the books, that I think she says at one point that Fred and George give James and Sirius a run for their money.
Did she?
I don't remember. Think so. Somebody says it. Maybe it wasn't McGonagall, but somebody says.
It makes sense. I mean, the two best friends, and then the two best friends' brothers. Yeah.
Hagrid says it.
Okay, Hagrid says it.
I knew somebody did. I know it's mentioned once.
So yeah,
they do have this, and we know like later on that James and Sirius have this very brotherly connection. I mean, Sirius runs away to live with him.
Yeah,
and all that.
And another discussion we kind of had last time that we weren't too sure of whether Lupin was illiterate or he had dyslexia or something. Seems that he's illiterate.
Yeah, he straight up said it.
Know how to read.
That's a bummer.
Or maybe he does have dyslexia, and that's the reason why he can't read.
Right. And it's the 70s, so maybe he just thinks he's illiterate, doesn't know he has dyslexia. Yeah.
You know, it's really fun to picture Lupin, Sirius, and James in like the 70s style outfits.
Not Peter. You always leaving him out.
We don't talk about Peter.
We don't talk about Peter.
No, imagine them just like, bell bottoms.
Oh yeah,
crazy hair
and the long hair.
Yeah.
I imagine James with the bigger glasses.
Yep.
The like square double, the thick frame on the top thing. That whatever those.
No.
The Jeffrey Dahmer glasses.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what I picture him having.
Well, I mean, we get a picture of them in the movie, but
they're grown up at that point.
Well, no, we have Snape's flashback.
Oh, yeah. Well, and he's got Harry Potter's He's got Harry's glasses.
And I don't know. They didn't really give off those 70 vibes, but I like to picture them like that.
Oh, a lot of the fan art that I've seen has them in like bell bottoms with 70s haircuts and stuff.
It's like that 70s show.
Yeah. That's
Sirius would be Hyde.
Sirius would be Hyde.
Wormtail's Kelso.
I don't know. Kelso's stupid, but he's confident.
Okay, fair enough.
And he gets all the ladies. Maybe Kelso's serious. He's like the good-looking one. Sirius is just a lot smarter. But Kelso is the good-looking one with all the confidence.
Man,
I know.
And James and Sirius were compared to Fred and George, and Peter was compared to Neville. No, you do no, not Neville.
Come on, book 1 and 2, Neville. Plus,
okay, fine.
Plus, the hat did take a long time to decide where to put Neville. Not as long as it took to decide where to put Peter, but
yeah.
Does that make Lily Donna?
Yeah, so James would have to be Eric.
Even though Eric acts more like Peter.
Yeah. I know, I think
James would have to be like Hyde. Right. Yeah.
Lupin. Would Lupin be Fez?
Oh my god. I don't
like Neville. Yeah, I think so. I think he could imagine. I mean, yeah, first 2 years, okay, I see it. I see Neville as
the Peter. Yeah. The only difference is that Neville really grows into his own and becomes a badass.
Yeah.
Peter just turns into the worst human in the entire series.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know. Umbridge is pretty awful.
Peter did a crazy action, Neville did a crazy action, but Neville did it for the right purposes.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Neville never betrayed his friends.
Well, yeah.
Got them murdered.
Yeah.
I think Harry imagines Peter looking like Neville. Yeah. And I can see that Lupin does kind of have book 5 Harry vibes.
Yeah, I'm noticing Lupin parallels Harry quite a bit here.
Which I think is appropriate.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it works. He's the underdog, underprivileged, troubled kid finding his home.
Except Lupin's poor, Harry was rich.
Yeah, and Harry does not have a chronic illness that makes him a stigma.
And he could read.
And Harry could read.
Which is quite amazing considering his upbringing.
Well, because he had to go to school.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the Dursleys would get a CPS call.
This is true, yeah.
And that's the only reason why he went to school, I'm sure. Look at you, dangly boy.
I know. His story is just relaxing and putting him to sleep.
Ooh. Look at that.
What?
He's got a big red...
Oh, he got a little breakout.
He's got a red rash right there. Like Snape.
I know, Snape. We haven't even talked about Snape. Oh, my God.
Poor Snape! I'm sorry for Snape. And also...
Picture him laying in the infirmary looking like Two-Face and Batman.
And I like that we're getting these little snippets of, like, Lily and Snape's relationship, where Lily's like, listen, he's really nice. You gotta be patient. Get to know him.
Just gotta be patient and hope he has a crush on you.
You stop it. Has Bailey been getting into the rose hips?
Oh, maybe.
Are we ready for the next one?
I am.
All right, let's see what happens next.
What's the title of the next one?
Chapter 8, First Year. Secrets.
Ooh, juicy.
Juicy. Ready, Bailey? Tuesday, 5th of October, 1971. The next full moon passed much as the first had. This time the wolf had clearly grown restless because Remus awoke with a number of deep scratches. They heal fast with a bit of antiseptic, he advised Madame Pomfrey, who fussed over him in the chill morning light. And faster still with magic, she smiled with a flourish of her wand. The cuts closed up almost instantly. Remus stared, amazed. "Can you get rid of the scars, too?" he asked eagerly. She shook her head sadly. "No, Remus, not these ones. I'm sorry." "It's okay." He sighed, dressing for school. This time he brought his change of clothes with him and left them in the tunnel just outside the shack to avoid having to go back to the tower this time. He'd meet the other boys in their first lesson and let them wonder where he'd been. "You don't have to go to school today," Madame Pomfrey was saying. "Not if you're too tired. I can write you a note." "I want to go," he replied. "It's not that bad, honestly." Pomfrey looked at him with serious eyes. "Not that bad for now. I'm afraid the transformations may start to take their toll as you grow up." "Have you looked after other kids like me, then?" He'd been wanting to ask for ages, but wasn't sure how. "No, dear, you're the first Hogwarts student that I know of who's been... bitten?" "Who's been bitten," she accepted gratefully. "But I promise I know what I'm doing. I've done plenty of reading on the subject." "You mean there are books about people like me?" "Well, yes." She sounded surprised. She sat down on the bed as he finished dressing. "You could borrow them if you like." He thought about it, then shook his head. They had Transfiguration first thing, but McGonagall didn't give him detention for not bringing his homework. She'd obviously decided to be more lenient round the full moon. She did make him promise to bring it with him next time, and he agreed, hoping he sounded sincere. James, Sirius, and Peter spent half their lesson trying to get his attention, but he steadfastly ignored them until McGonagall threatened to separate all four of them. In the halls on their way to Charms, Remus knew there was no escape. It was a good 5-minute walk. "So, where were you?" Sirius blurted out, walking on his left-hand side. "Nowhere," he replied, trying to hurry on. "Oh, go on," James pleaded, coming up on his right-hand side. "Tell us, was it the same place you went last month?" "Maybe." "Were you in detention again?" asked Peter, struggling to keep up. Remus cursed himself for not having thought of that. Detention would have been the perfect cover. "Nope." "Then where—" "Watch it. Watch it, half-blood." Remus had been too busy evading questions to look where he was going, and had run smack into Snape, who was coming round the corner. Already wound up, Remus squared his shoulders and attempted to push past roughly. "Watch yourself, Snivellus!" Snape didn't move and pushed him instead, Mulciber appearing at his left shoulder, looming menacingly over the smaller boys.
Snape is always so rude.
Wow, okay.
It was rude.
It was rude. "I know it was you that broke into our dorms the other night," he hissed. "All of you." "Yeah? Prove it," James smirked, folding his arms. Snape's lip curled. "I can't yet, but I will. I'll get you back too, I promise." "We're quaking in our boots," Sirius replied, leaning against the wall as if he were bored. "Now, would you kindly move it?" "Your idea, was it, Black?" Snape drawled. "Or yours, Potter? Had to have been one of you. Pettigrew doesn't have the guts, and dear Lupin here clearly hasn't got the brains." Remus clenched his fist. He could see Snape's hand on his What?
Just underestimating Lupin here.
He could see Snape's hand on his wand. Severus probably knew all sorts of curses and hexes. James had taught Remus one or two, but he was too blind with rage to remember any of them now. "Move along now, gentlemen!" A sharp voice suddenly rang out over the corridor. It was Professor Flitwick stepping out of his classroom to see what the hold-up was. "Severus, you're clogging up the halls, and you four are supposed to be in my class. Come along!" Remus felt overheated and agitated for the rest of Charms, which was usually his favourite lesson. It relied more on practical work with his wand than reading or writing, and he often did better than even James and Sirius. Finding it difficult to calm down, he kept shooting his cushions across the room like missiles, rather than guiding them carefully through the hoops Flitwick had hung from the ceiling.
They'd been working on levitation charms for a few weeks now, and Peter was the only one still struggling. In Remus's opinion, Peter's problem was a lack of imagination. James and Sirius were both unerringly confident, and he'd found that confidence was all you needed to complete most basic spells. Remus himself generally felt able to complete any task if it looked simple enough. Peter, on the other hand, worried about everything. He read and reread his textbooks, trying to copy the complicated diagrams rather than just copy what Flitwick showed them. I expect you all to be able to levitate this book by the end of next week, Flitwick said at the end of the lesson. The book was enormous, about half the size of the tiny professor, and looked as though a fully grown man might have trouble carrying it very far. So, come prepared for a quick test of your abilities. Peter groaned as they collected their things to leave. Remus had managed to calm down by lunchtime, but still had trouble controlling his magic later in the afternoon, and was glad they only had herbology and history of magic. He wondered whether it was his temper, which had always been short, or whether it was the full moon. He always had a lot of energy after a transformation, even before he knew he could do magic. Now his wand buzzed in his hand like static on a TV aerial. He tried a quick Lumos, hiding in a toilet cubicle between lessons, and nearly burnt his retinas out. Perhaps the book Madame Pomfrey had mentioned might tell him more about it, but he'd never know now. There might be other books in the library, but he hadn't checked. He knew the word well enough, and could spell it out if he concentrated hard enough, but he didn't dare. Remus lived in fear that if he wrote it down or said it aloud, then somehow everyone would find out his secret, and it was just better to keep stuff like that in your head.
Just point out now his wand busted in his hand.
His wand buzzed in his hands. Yeah,
buzzing in his hands, and Lumos blinded him.
Yep. See,
some pent up frustration there.
See, this author is also doing what Rowling does with the wand imagery.
Katie pointed out Snape's in the situation again. He knows who did it, but he can't prove it.
Yep.
This has just been Snape's life.
This is literally this poor man's entire existence. I know it was you, but I can't prove it. Oh, Snape.
Potter!
Thursday, 7th of October, 1971. It was especially important to keep his secrets to himself now because Remus was being watched. By McGonagall, who still raised an eyebrow when she saw he wasn't taking notes. By Madame Pomfrey, who was always trying to get him to stop by the hospital wing for a quick check-over. And by Snape, who was still furious that he couldn't figure out how the itching powder incident had happened. Remus might have been able to bear all these interferences if it wasn't for a fourth person observing him. This stalker was much subtler, much less direct in his surveillance, but notable nonetheless. Sirius. At first, Remus thought the other boy was just nosy, part of the entitlement that he and James shared. They had to know everything about everybody. They were constantly telling Remus and Peter other people's business. So-and-so's father was turned down for a promotion at the ministry years ago, and that's why they've got that chip on their shoulder. Miranda Thrupp's great-aunt was once under investigation for the illegal use of a love potion, and now no one ever drank the tea at Thrupp's house. Professor Slughorn knew more about the dark arts than he let on, and the Slug Club was notorious for turning out dark wizards with influence. Of course, neither of them knew anything about Remus, and in the beginning he assumed this was why Sirius was so watchful. But he never asked any direct questions, and if he was curious about Lupin's family or upbringing, then it was a private interest that James did not share. James rarely watched other people, Remus had noticed. He preferred other people to be watching him. No one else seemed to notice, thankfully. Sirius was sly in that respect. Only very occasionally Remus managed to catch him unawares, staring intently with those deep blue eyes. He didn't even have the shame to look away when he was caught, only softened his gaze into a friendly smile, which Remus was obliged to return. That Thursday they were finishing their homework in the Gryffindor common room. Well, James was finishing Remus's homework, having completed his own. He offered to do it in return for Remus teaching him the obfuscate spell, and despite his pride, Remus had acquiesced. He really didn't want another detention with McGonagall, and James was good at imitating other people's handwriting.
Sirius was completing his own essay and had already written 3 extra inches on the use of lacewing flies in transformative drafts, plus diagrams. There were books strewn all over the table they'd claimed for themselves, along with inkwells and scrunched-up rolls of parchment. Peter was trying to levitate an apple and get it into a wastepaper basket 4 feet away. So far, he could get it up into the air, but then it wobbled and fell back down again. Frazzled, Peter ran his fingers through his hair again and consulted his text. "You'll get it, Pete, don't worry," James muttered, not looking up from Remus's paper. "Keep at it." "I'm trying," Peter whined. "I'm not sure if it's the movement I'm getting wrong. The book says to use a smooth serpentine action, but I'm not sure." He swirled his wand in the air. Remus tutted. "It's not like that," he said bluntly. "It's like an S shape on its side, look." He performed the spell, effortlessly lifting the apple into the air and sent it sailing into the bin neatly. "An S shape? Are you sure?" Peter frowned. He aimed his own wand at a scrunched-up ball of paper from the table. "Wingardium Leviosa!" he chanted, waving his wand in the same way Lupin had. Sure enough, the paper flew shakily upwards, then flew, with slightly less grace, into the bin, bouncing off the sides as it fell to the bottom and landing beside the apple. Peter stared wide-eyed. "I did it!" he gasped. "An S shape! Why didn't it say that in the book?" "Well done, Pete," James said, looking up and smiling. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "You should be a teacher, Remus." Lupin snorted, looking away bashfully. James continued.
Hint.
Hint, hint. "I'm nearly done with this. Just need to check something. Can you pass me Magical Theory, the waffling book?" Remus felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Trying not to panic, he looked down at the pile of books James was pointing at. One of them was definitely about potions. It had a cauldron on the cover. The others, it was anyone's guess. The gold and silver lettering on each seemed to either shift and swirl before his eyes. Was it better to just pick one up, even if it was the wrong one? He looked back at James desperately, who was reading over what he'd written. Peter was too busy levitating more balls of paper to notice Remus's turmoil. He looked down again, biting his lip. Sirius cleared his throat quietly and leaned across the desk. He silently tapped one of the books with his forefinger without looking at Remus. It was a big black leather-bound tome which Remus recognized vaguely. Gratefully, he snatched it up and handed it to James. "Thanks, mate." "Cheers, mate," James said absent-mindedly, returning to his work. Sirius carried on as if nothing had happened. Remus felt his cheeks burning.
I think Sirius knows.
I think Sirius knows too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sirius is kind enough to not call him out on it and embarrass him.
Yeah.
Sherlock Snape. Frustrated Sherlock Snape.
That should be a fan fiction, Sherlock Snape.
Every time Harry does something, but from his perspective. Oh, God. "It was Potter. How do you know? You can't prove it."
Watch me.
Watch me. He'd need to have a Watson. Elementary, dear Evans. Yes. Oh my God, that's perfect. Lily B is Watson. That's great.
But instead of Sherlock Holmes always figuring out the case, Snape always fails.
Mm-hmm. It's all right, Seb. You'll get the next one.
Potter. Yeah, I guess it is. Lupin is just naturally gifted. It's just instinct.
I think it's instinct. I think it's watching the teachers. Because he can't read, he's probably paying more attention to what the teachers are doing.
Yeah.
And probably some of it is looking at the diagrams.
Yeah.
But I think he's probably paying a lot more attention to what they're physically doing in the class because he can't go back and
That's true.
read it later.
And unlike, say, Peter Pettigrew, who's taking copious notes and just paying attention to the text and diagrams, he's actually paying attention to the spell being performed.
Right. Yeah. Peter's so focused on the text. almost in a Hermione kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And Remus is going with the hands-on approach, and he's like, okay, well, this is what the diagram says, but this is what Flitwick did in class, and this is how it worked.
Exactly. Reading it isn't always the best method. It's kind of like when you start a new job, and it's like, okay, this is what the procedures say. Now I'm going to show you what we actually do.
Right. Sorry, just so handsome.
I kind of want to know how Sirius is going to handle that, though, breaking it to Lupin.
Like, dude, I know.
Lupin going up to Sirius, like, don't you?
Yeah, it's. I think it's very interesting that the author is like, he'll catch Sirius like watching him, and Sirius is just like, what?
Maybe this is how Sirius and Lupin's love begins. Sirius is like, I'll give you reading lessons.
I'll teach you how to read, bro. It's all good.
And then one day they reach for the same book.
And their hands touch. You must be calm.
Lupin felt the wolf inside him grow in that moment.
You must be calm during reading time. Okay? Okay.
He's fine.
Animal magnetism. Well, that's in book 6, isn't it? Doesn't Ron say that, or is it book 4?
I couldn't tell you.
I can't remember.
But I remember.
But it's Ron says it. It's our animal magnet. How'd you get those girls? I think it's book 4. Either way, yep, book 4. All right, ready?
Luke is on point today.
He is. He's got it all. He's got all the facts right now. Chapter 9, first year. Scars.
Scars. Why does he want to get rid of the scars? Come on. Everyone digs scars.
They do. Note, mention of child abuse toward the end of the chapter. So, a trigger warning.
We've all read Harry Potter. We've gotten enough child abuse. We're used to it now.
15th of October, 1971. Remus had to spend the next few days avoiding Sirius, or at least avoiding being alone with him. This wasn't easy. The boys spent all their time together, especially on the weekends. They all got through the Friday charms lesson with no trouble, even Peter. Flitwick was thrilled that the entire class had mastered levitation so early in the year that he let them out early for lunch. Sirius made himself unavoidable the very next week, during their flying lesson. If Remus hadn't hated history of magic so much, then flying would have been his least favourite subject. 20 minutes into their first lesson with Madame Hooch, he'd learned that he was afraid of heights, and the rest of the classes had been miserable for him. Feel you, Lupin. Feel you. James was the star of the class, of course, and even the other Marauders found him insufferable as he flitted around the Quidditch pitch, throwing loops and fients as if he were borne on a broom. Sirius was excellent too, and most of the other kids in the class had grown up playing on broomsticks. Even Peter was competent. It had rained the night before, and the ground was soft and muddy. What?
I love how that's like the standard. Even Peter was competent. Even Peter can do it. You know it's awful when you can't.
They do that in the books. They're like, even Neville didn't do so bad.
That's true. I wonder if Peter ever melts a cauldron.
We'll find out. It had rained the night before, and the ground was soft and muddy. They changed out of their usual lace-up shoes and into thick boots and scarlet flying kits before squelching out onto the pitch. They picked up their brooms and waited instruction. The brooms were provided by the school. First years weren't allowed to bring their own, but James would tell anyone who stopped long enough to listen that he had a top-of-the-line model at home. Right, mount your brooms, please, ladies and gentlemen, Hooch bellowed at the group. Nice strong wind today, so I want you all to take good care. Potter, no showing off. Remus clambered onto his broom, swallowing hard. If he could manage not to be sick, then it would be a victory. I'd like 5 clean laps round the pitch, then a good landing back here for each of you. Mind the puddle and remember to lean into the wind when possible. Use it to your advantage.
5 points to whoever's back first.
And then, with barely any warning, the silver-haired witch blew her whistle hard. Remus and Lily, the only two muggle-borns in the class, were the last off the ground. Once the redhead was in the air, however, she streaked ahead with ease.
Bit higher, Lupin, come on now.
Hooch boomed from below, shouting through a megaphone. He wanted to ignore her, but there was no escape. At least back at St. Edmund's, when they made you do cross-country, you could hide round the corner and skive off in town for the afternoon. He pushed himself higher, trying to look ahead and not down, trying to think about anything other than the empty space between him and the ground. He could see Lily's bright red plate flashing ahead like a fox's tail, Peter's shining blonde hair somewhere in the middle of the group. Though he couldn't see that far ahead, he knew that James and Sirius were almost neck and neck. Remus just ploughed on grimly, not wanting to go any faster. Who cared if he was last, if he didn't break his neck getting there? As he rounded a corner at the end of the pitch, the wind really hit him, and he tried not to slow down too much, leaning forward. It was so cold, and the grey morning air battered his face. The second lap was as bad as the first. By the third, he noticed that James had taken to circling each of the towers and the empty spectator stands, despite Madame Hooch's admonishments. On the fourth lap, Remus had company.
Having fun?
Sirius grinned, cruising along beside him. He looked so comfortable, as if he could raise both hands over his head, spin upside down, and fly backwards without any trouble at all.
What are you doing?
Remus frowned, trying to ignore him.
Trying to lose? James is going to win,
Sirius shrugged.
Might as well let him have his moment. Thought I'd hang out with you. Why?
Remus replied through gritted teeth.
Thought you might want the company.
Remus didn't need to look at him now to know he was grinning that irritating Sirius black grin.
Plus we're about to land and I know you hate landing. Piss off! No. I'm warning you, Black. You can't punch me up here, Lupin, unless you want to let go of your broom. God, you're annoying. Yep.
Sirius flew up in front of them, all the way around, a perfect orbit.
Piss off!
Remus tried to dodge him, wobbling dangerously.
Time to land. Remember to stick your legs out and lean back, then bend your knees as you hit the... Oi!
Remus had grabbed the tail of Sirius's broom and given it a hard yank. Laughing, Sirius righted himself, then flew back to Remus's side and gave him a hard shove back. Remus shook, but held on tight, making his descent. It was much smoother than before. He leaned back, then twisted quickly to push Sirius again.
Out of my way,
he yelled, going faster.
You can be the last one down for once. Oh, no, you don't.
Sirius now grabbed Remus's broom tail, laughing, tugging him backwards. This was perhaps a step too far, as they were both quite close to the ground now. The two wrestling boys tumbled towards earth, brooms flying out from beneath them. They both crash-landed in a huge muddy puddle, skidding and rolling forwards, soaking their brooms in the process.
Black! Lupin!
Madame Hooch marched over to the two boys sprawled in the mud. The other Gryffindors gathered round, giggling and pointing. Sirius leapt to his feet with all of the grace his nobility possessed him with, and pulled Lupin up roughly by the hand. They both looked up at the teacher, blinking, water droplets from their eyes.
What did I say about minding the puddle?
Madame Hooch raised an amused eyebrow. She usually saw the fun in things.
A point from Gryffindor. You better go and wash off in the showers. Off you go.
Oh, yeah. You two better go wash off in the showers.
Yep.
After your little foreplay on the brooms.
Little wrestling match on the broom.
Grabbing each other's brooms like that.
Naughty. They both waddled toward the Quidditch changing rooms, holding out their heavy waterlogged robes.
Bloody ridiculous kit,
Remus grumbled as they stepped into the squat litter stone building.
How are you ever going to dry it? The house elves will take care of that,
Sirius replied, shaking his off and dumping it in a pile in the corner. Remus couldn't be bothered to ask what on earth house elves were. He pulled his own robes off and kicked away his boots, then entered a shower and cubicle to continue undressing. There were towels laid out already, and the water was deliciously warm. He leaned forward into the stream, letting it warm his blood, watching the mud and rogue blades of grass swirl down the drain. At least he'd got
out of 40 more minutes of flying. He scrubbed his hands roughly over his hair. Without Matron's monthly haircuts, his hair was getting longer and softer, sticking straight up most of the time, as messy as James's. He could finally see the colour of it, but was disappointed. It appeared to be a bland, mousy brown. Remus finished in the shower before Sirius and got out, looking for his uniform quickly. He was half-dressed once Sirius finally emerged, his long hair swept back, wet and shining like oil. He was already fully dressed and looked impossibly cool and grown up, while Remus had realized he'd missed a button on his shirt and had to begin all over again. "What's that?" Sirius said suddenly. Remus looked up, then back down. "Miss Bim." Sirius was pointing at a long silver stripe which stretched from the left half of his collarbone down diagonally across his chest to his right nipple. He fumbled with his buttons, trying to close the shirt faster. "A scar," he muttered. There was no point saying anything else now. He barely noticed them anymore. They were just there, as much a part of him as his freckles or the fine hairs on his arms. Did it happen to you at home, where you grew up?" There was something odd in Sirius's voice. Remus found he couldn't speak, so he just nodded. Sirius nodded too. "I've got scars," he said, so quietly that Remus thought he'd misheard at first. Sirius bent down and pulled up his trouser leg, turning his ankle to show Remus the marks there. His scars weren't like Remus's, which were big and rough and jagged, full of rage and hunger. The silver stripes on the backs of Sirius's legs were thin and straight, uniform in their cruelty. Remus stared for a few seconds before Sirius dropped the edge of the fabric and straightened up. They stared each other up and down for a full minute, Remus feeling very hot, Sirius's eyes cool and calm. Then it broke. "Shall we go and watch James make a prat of himself?" Sirius asked. Remus nodded again, and they both stepped back out in the cold autumn air. They took their seats on the hard benches in the spectator stands and watched the rest of the class flitting back and forth across the pitch, red robes fluttering behind them. Lily, though lacking James's formal technique, was giving him a run for his money when it came to speed, beating him in 2 of 3 races between goalposts. "Remus," Sirius said suddenly as their classmates came in for their final landing. "Yeah? You can't read, can you?" Remus sighed. He had enough secrets to keep as it was, and Sirius had shared one of his. "Nah, I won't tell anyone. Cheers." That serious black grin.
Well, there it is. He knew.
He knew.
At least he's keeping it a secret.
Yep.
Looks like Mama Black is not too kind to him.
Wahlberga.
Yeah, there we go. Wahlberga.
Wahlberga.
No wonder with a name like that, I'd be grumpy too.
She's also inbred.
That too.
I want to say his dad's name is Osiris? Something like that.
I can't remember his parents. Do they ever say it in the books, or is that a Pottermore thing?
I'm pretty sure they mention her name in
They mention her name. His name, I don't know.
Maybe when he might when he goes through the family tree on the wall, the tapestry.
Yeah, maybe.
But either way, poor Sirius.
I know.
Poor dude.
But I saw that whole scene going a little bit different in my head.
I think so did everyone who was watching too. They thought it was going to be
You're also
like
wet and muddy. Go in there, get undressed, and take a shower.
I thought they thought it was going to be a little more like, Remus, don't you feel so much better getting out of the shower?
Remus, I've dropped my wand. Could you grab it?
I mean, they are only 11.
Yeah, that's true.
So, also James says he doesn't find Lily Evans annoying.
No, wonder why.
I remember the author saying it would be a slow burn. It is a slow burn.
Yeah.
Those are the best.
We're getting some embers, though.
We're rolling the sticks together like this.
Stick together. I see what you did there. The friction's building.
The friction is starting to build.
But yeah, apparently Harry's mother is very good at
Flying.
Thank you. At first I was going to say riding brooms, but then I was like, we won't say that.
We won't say it like that.
That could be taken a lot of different ways.
Yeah, she's apparently a very fair flyer.
Yes.
And James is obviously, I guess, the best flyer in the class. And he knows it.
Well, it looks like Harry took after him.
Yep. Mom helped.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
You know it. And at least with Harry, the Dursleys never left any scars. Well, physical scars.
I was gonna say,
a lot of emotional and mental scarring there.
Oh yeah, they never beat him.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna get coffee.
Oh, okay. And then on to the next. What's the next chapter called? I'm gonna check real quick. Next chapter is called History.
Wonder if Sirius
History class? History between the families? Between the students? Between Sirius Black and Lupin? Is Lupin and Sirius Black related somehow?
It shouldn't be. I am.
Fair.
Sirius is a pure blood.
Well, yeah, but maybe Sirius's dad is, you know, he likes to go out and find a muggle every now and then. That taboo.
Maybe he likes to dip his wand in other pools of, I don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
Going with that metaphor. No, I don't know. Maybe Sirius is related to Greyback?
Maybe.
Yeah, he always talks about how he's quick to duck from Vernon.
It's true. Okay, so Harry doesn't have any physical scars, but it's not from lack of trying.
Oh, you know what? There's a line in book 1 where McGonagall says, "I'm going to take you to Wood," and Harry thinks he's going to get beat.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like, no, Oliver Wood.
Okay, so
You know what's the Harry Potter Virgin podcast that I talk about?
Mm-hmm.
They're always talking about how fit Oliver Wood is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little weird.
Well, I mean, he's all about Quidditch. I'm sure he's in peak physical condition.
Yeah, but he's also technically still a teenager. He's not an adult yet, guys. And they're just like, Oliver Wood is fit. He's proper fit, he is.
Well, no, because he's like in his last year or second to last year in the first one.
But they just seem a little thirsty when they say it. They're just like, well, yeah, but he's real fit, isn't he? Like, they're just, I don't know.
Right, but he's like 18.
No, he's not. He's in how many of the books? He's in like the first 3 books.
I thought the second book was the last one. I thought he was gone in the third.
No.
No?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm pretty sure he's still there in the 3rd book.
Oh. I was thinking left in the second one, because I was going to say, I thought he was like 17, 18 or something like that. But
They probably are talking about when they first watched the movies. Sean Biggerstaff.
yeah.
I know. I never got into that. I was never into Oliver Wood. Never felt that kind of burning desire for Oliver Wood.
Okay, he's in the fifth year in book 1. So he was in year 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's not in any other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I never got on the Oliver Wood bandwagon.
You never. No, I'm not. Oh my god. You never got on the whole wood wagon.
No, did not hop on that wood wagon. Nope.
I think it's different because like I feel like a lot of people talk about that, and you're basing it off of how you felt when you first read it. Like, yeah, going back.
Or when they first saw him in the movie.
Yeah. Like, now it would be weird, but when you first saw it in the movie, it wouldn't be weird.
This is true. It's like when you first watched movie 4 and had a crush on Hermione.
Exactly. Someone here?
My mother is doing laundry, I think. Hang on.
Yeah, I never had a crush on Hermione either. But I also didn't watch them until now, so. Princess Leia, yes. 100%. Yeah, Tom Felton. I don't know. That blonde bad boy look, I guess. Oh, Emma Watson did? Jeez. I wonder if anything ever came of that. Were they like together in real life at one point? Maybe then he started losing his hair. So she moved on.
What happened?
We were talking about people having crushes on different characters and stuff.
I still have
Apparently,
crushes on characters.
I know you do. But at least yours are still legal.
Fair enough. I've never had a crush on an underage character.
Lucas said that Emma Watson apparently had a crush on Tom Hiddleston.
Ah.
Mm-hmm. He collapsed while watching golf?
Tom Felton?
Guess so.
You said Hiddleston. Talking about Felton?
Felton, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Shannon told me that actually that he collapsed and they thought maybe he had a seizure or something. I don't know.
All the chemicals from the hair dye finally catching up to him, I guess.
The man is almost bald, and I did know that he and Emma Watson are pretty close friends.
Oh, okay.
Like they're still pretty tight.
I wonder how close. Like Harry and Ron close, or
Ron and
Sirius and Lupin close?
I was gonna say Ron and Hermione close, but okay.
Oh.
Sirius and Lupin close. I don't know. Bellatrix and Voldemort.
Do they
close?
share secrets after they take showers? Do you think
Bellatrix and Voldemort close?
Do you think they ever
Slughorn and his pineapple close?
Maybe. I wonder if Slughorn has his pajamas. If he has them at this point.
Yes.
We get to see Slughorn in his pajamas.
I hope so. The story will suck if I don't get to see Slughorn in his jammy jams. It won't be worth it. if I don't get to see Slughorn in his jammies.
Yeah, I think it's probably a Harry and Ron close thing.
I did see something like Tom Felton joined a celebrity dating app.
Oh, really?
Like,
well, there's a celebrity dating
there's
app?
like a dating app just for famous people.
Oh, okay.
So it's like
I could imagine if
exclusive.
he hopped on Tinder, his phone would probably explode.
Yeah, it's just for like people in the industry, just
Mhm.
for like whatever, because he was talking about how it was really hard for him to like meet people.
Yeah.
Probably
Because
is.
every other person would want to just date him because it's Tom Felton.
And it's Draco Malfoy.
He's Draco Malfoy.
And I always was like, I don't want to date Draco Malfoy. I want to date his dad.
Or maybe there's a lot of people who think like you now, and that's why he was having trouble. So it's like,
Lucius is hot. Jason Isaacs, the man's gorgeous.
I guess so.
No contest. Lucius or Draco? Are you kidding me? Please. Although, if you watch the Harry Potter musicals, Draco is the illegitimate child of Narcissa and Dobby. Yes.
Oh my god, I don't like that.
Oh, it was very funny.
Dobby has been very bad house elf.
Draco finds out Dobby is his real father, and he's like, all those times I beat him senseless. I feel terrible now. That's why you still wear diapers and are afraid to use the potty, Draco.
Oh man, I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
Oh god, but Umbridge is totally worth it. Oh my children, I'm Dolores Umbridge, and this is my boyfriend, Dumbledore. Dumbledore. Oh god, Umbridge is so good in the musical. It's so good. Anyway, shall I read the next chapter?
History.
Did I scar you for life with that?
All right, history.
Dobby
Let's
must-
leave that.
Dobby must punish himself, sir.
Yeah, let's just leave that in the past. Let that be history.
Okay. Chapter 10, First Year, History. Saturday, 23rd of October, 1971. Did you just never get taught? Primus shrugged, tired and frustrated. It was a week after the flying lesson, and Sirius had caught him on his own again. He'd been sitting quite happily on his bed, flicking through one of James's Quidditch magazines. He liked the moving pictures, even if he still didn't understand the rules, and it was the closest thing to telly that they had at Hogwarts. I got taught, he replied, turning the page, hoping Sirius would take the hint and get lost. He didn't. Remus closed the magazine. I got taught, he repeated. Just didn't learn properly. When I look at the words, I don't think I see what everyone else sees. It doesn't make any sense. All the letters keep jumping around and changing. Teacher said I was just thick. No one had ever made much of a fuss about his problems with schoolwork at St. Edmund's. They barely had any homework since no one did it anyway. Lots of the boys had problems. Either they couldn't or wouldn't be taught. It wasn't as if anyone expected much either way. But how have you been doing it? Sirius was like a dog with a bone. Doing what? Well, everything. All your work here at Hogwarts. Remus looked at him as if he was the one who was stupid. Sirius, I haven't been doing it. In case you haven't noticed, I'm in detention every night. Well, yeah, obviously. Sirius waved a hand. But the other day in potions, I saw you. You didn't take any notes, didn't even look at the book or the blackboard, and you still prepared all the ingredients for the cure for boils perfectly. Slughorn gave you 5 points. Remus felt himself blush at the memory. He wasn't used to getting praise from teachers. Oh, that was easy. He shook his head. Sluggy told us how to do it in the lesson before. I just remembered it. Bloody hell, you must have a brilliant memory then. Remus shrugged. He supposed that was true. His teachers at St. Edmund's had remarked more than once that he knew an awful lot of words for someone so dim-witted. Sirius was staring into space now, clearly deep in thought. Remus could practically see the cogs working in his mind. Sometimes Sirius was an entirely closed book. Other times he was so easy to read it was almost funny.
If you could read, you'd be as good as me and James. Better, probably.
Remus snorted.
So modest, Black. Well, you would!
Sirius missed the sarcasm completely, still looking thoughtful.
Your wand work is much more natural, and if your memory is as good as you say it is...
He chewed his lip.
I bet there's a spell for it.
Remus laughed.
You're going to cure me with a spell? Why not?
Remus had thought about it already. Of course he had. But he was more aware of the limitations of magic than anyone. After all, he had scars which would not heal and a monthly nightmare which no one could prevent.
Magic just can't fix stuff like that, he replied bluntly. Why else does James wear glasses? I think there are spells for eyesight, Sirius said. Maybe they're just not worth the effort, or too dangerous or complicated or something. It's not just the reading, Remus countered. My writing's crap too. I'm slow and it comes out all messy. There are definitely spells for that, Sirius said confidently. You can bewitch your quill. I've seen my father do it on official documents. His handwriting's really scratchy normally.
Remus was at a loss. Sirius clearly wasn't going to give up. He chewed his lip.
Why are you so interested, anyway? You're my fellow Marauder. We can't have you in detention every day. What if the Slytherins strike back? We need your evil mind for pranks.
His eyes glittered.
Speaking of, I'm assuming you haven't done your history homework yet. Nope. Okay then, let's get started.
Sirius jumped off the bed and began rooting around in his trunk.
No, you're not doing my homework for me,
Remus protested, standing up himself, folding his arms.
Too bloody right, I'm not,
Sirius replied, withdrawing a heavy book. It was a history of magic. Remus recognized the size and shape.
I just fancied refreshing my memory, that's all. So I'm going to sit here and read it aloud because that helps me study. And if you happen to retain some of it in that enormous brain of yours, then there's not that much I can do about it.
Remus huffed.
Haven't you got something better to do? Where's James, anyway? Watching the Gryffindor Quidditch practice.
Sirius settled down on his bed, opening the book.
Reckons he'll get on the team next year, so he's trying to pick up some tips. Peter's followed him, obviously. Now, be quiet, please. I'm trying to work.
He cleared his throat.
A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. Chapter 1. Ancient Egypt. The Rites and Rituals of Imhotep.
And on he went. And on. And on. Remus stayed standing for a while, trying to decide whether or not to just walk out of the room and slam the door. But he found that he really wasn't that angry. It was difficult to stay angry with Sirius, no matter how annoying he was. So Remus sat down and listened. It turned out that history wasn't that boring after all, once you understood the basics. Plus, Sirius was considerably more animated than Professor Binns. His voice was clear and steady, never stumbling over more complicated words or phrases, as if he'd read the book 100 times. Remus had heard him tell James that he was fluent in Latin and Greek. The Black family apparently took pride in that sort of thing. On he ploughed, chapter after chapter, from the gory Egyptian resurrection charms, to cryptic Greek oracles, to magical Mesopotamian priestesses. The ancient world opened up in Remus's mind, and he found himself lying back on his bed, arms behind his head with his eyes closed, letting Sirius lead him through time. Eventually, the other boy's voice was almost hoarse, and he just spoke above a whisper. Evening had closed round them, and the common room was bathed in a golden-orange glow as the sun set. Halfway through Chapter 5, Tiberius and the Advancements of Roman Battle Magic, Sirius let out a quiet cough and put down the book.
I don't think I can study today,
he croaked. Remus's eyes snapped open. He sat up, blinking.
That's okay,
he said quietly.
It's dinner now. I'm starving.
They both got up, stretched, and headed downstairs. James and Peter were waiting for them at the Gryffindor table in their usual seats.
How was practice?
Sirius asked, after draining a goblet of pumpkin juice. His voice had almost returned to normal, only sounding slightly strained.
Fracking, James replied cheerfully, spearing a sausage on the end of his fork and using it to scoop up some mashed potato. How come you didn't come? Homework, Sirius replied, pouring gravy over his own mash. After they finished dinner, James regaled them with a blow-by-blow account of the Quidditch practice, listing every player on the team, their strengths and faults, their techniques, and what he could do to improve them. Peter interjected occasionally with his own opinions, which barely differed from James's. Pudding was millionaire shortbread, which neither Sirius nor James liked. Remus thought they were mad and took their distaste as evidence of their snobbery. He'd have eaten theirs too, but Peter got there first, scoffing the lot. I've got some sweets, the smaller boy offered, digging in his robe pockets and withdrawing a bulging brown bag. Mum sent them. Help yourself. Cheers, Pete. They dug in, munching their way through fizzing Whizbees, chocolate frogs, and flavour-changing gobstoppers happily. Remus helped himself to a few as well, until they all felt quite sick. What homework were you doing? James asked, scratching his chin distractedly. I thought we'd finished everything for this week. Yeah, I was behind on history, had to go back and check something. Sirius was scratching too, near his collarbone. Watching them made Remus start to itch. The back of his hand tickled as if a small insect were crawling over him. He suddenly thought of the itching powder and looked down. He nearly screamed. The back of his hand was growing thick, dark hair at an alarming rate. He was transforming. It wasn't anywhere near a full moon. How could this be happening? He stood up so suddenly he nearly fell over backwards. He had to get out. Fast. What's up, Lupin? James stared at him, startled. Remus looked back at him, then at Sirius. They were both growing hair too. Dark curls sprouted from their faces, their hands and arms, every bit of exposed skin. He gaped, speechless. He ran his tongue over his teeth. They weren't getting any longer. Oh, bloody hell, James said, looking down at himself, then at the other two boys. What's going on? Peter, Sirius growled, his face almost covered in hair. Are you sure your mum sent those sweets? Peter, who hadn't had any sweets yet, stared at them both and turned red, spluttering. Well, I mean, I thought they were from her. They arrived this morning. Pete! James roared. People were looking at them now, turning and nudging each other. Soon the entire dining hall was whispering and pointing at the three incredibly hairy boys at the Gryffindor table. Plenty of people were giggling too. But of course, no one was laughing louder than Severus Snape over at the Slytherin benches.
Snape got his revenge.
Come on! Sirius stood up, sticking his furry nose up the air of aristocratic dignity that was nothing short of hilarious. Let's go to the hospital wing. We can plot our revenge later. As they left to howls of laughter from the rest of the great hall, Remus cringed in shame, covering his face with his hands. Every inch of him was now covered in the same glossy black hair. He didn't find it as funny as James and Sirius seemed to. Told you they'd strike back, Sirius muttered.
Ooh. Madame Pomfrey must be so busy all the time.
Yeah.
Think of normal school nurses, You get 10 kids pretending to be sick and wanting to go home. Maybe a kid with a headache every now and then. Maybe once, twice a week, you'll get someone who's actually sick.
Yeah.
Madame Pomfrey literally has to, correct probably a million different types of bad spells.
Yep. And Quidditch accidents. And this.
It'd be funny if they walked in there and were like, so what's the cure for this? And she just hands them a pair of scissors. Here you
go. Imagine how busy Madame Pomfrey was when Fred and George were putting out the puking pastilles and stuff.
Yeah.
Or nosebleed nougat.
Well, Fred and George developed the antidote for them. Remember?
Yeah, that's true.
You gonna make it?
I know. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I'm sorry.
But yeah, nosebleed, nougat, all that. Yeah,
Tongue
they
toffee.
they had the antidote. They just they tried it on themselves until they figured out a way to stop said bleeding. So they may have been in there quite a bit.
That's what I mean. With the same thing over and over.
Doing some research, you know.
Well, don't you remember
So what?
they had a Quidditch practice where one of the chasers ate one on accident and like her nose like wouldn't stop bleeding.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That's what I mean.
It is a precursor to them becoming animagi. That's what I thought too.
Yep.
It's like a precursor thing. Snape.
And why is it all three of them and not Peter? Because Peter doesn't count. That's why.
Just Peter doesn't count. Snape will get punished for this. Will he? Will they find out he did it?
They know he did it. Are you kidding me?
Snape knows they did it. How are they
That's
going to
true.
prove it?
Well, they won't. It's just going to be a back and forth war.
Yep.
Can't get them in trouble with the teachers, but that doesn't mean they can't retaliate.
That's right.
Poor Snape. Wonder what's going to happen to him.
I know. I know.
Gonna hide a Mimbletonia.
A what?
Can't
You can do
say
it.
You know what I
Mimbulus Mimbletonia.
Mimbulus Mimbletonia under his pillow or something.
I don't know. But I think it's interesting that Sirius's solution is to read to Lupin.
Oh, it's a lot easier than trying to teach him to read.
That's true.
But I think we've figured out that actually is dyslexia.
Yeah, he's got dyslexia. That's exactly what it is.
Even describes that the
letters jump around
and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's totally dyslexia. Poor Lupin.
Right, but apparently he's a genius with a photographic memory, really.
Right.
So once he does learn how to read, watch out, Hermione.
Watch out, Hermione.
Wonder if there is a spell to fix dyslexia.
I mean, he obviously ends up becoming a very gifted and talented wizard, so I'm assuming he's.
But is that because he learns how to read, or just because he, through experience, he retains everything?
He's got to learn how to read. He's got to learn how to read. Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I would think he does, but I'm just saying that he's as gifted as he is. Could be they didn't. Does he ever read Did he ever read to the class when he's the dark arts teacher?
Nobody assigns a textbook.
That's true, but it doesn't mean he doesn't read it.
Also, he has them write essays and he grades them.
Oh yeah, he does.
So he has to read them.
So he is gonna.
Yeah, he's gonna have to learn how to read at some point. Like maybe him and Sirius figure out his dyslexia or something, but he will have to learn how to read. In the meantime, this is a very, very nice thing for Sirius to do.
Oh, 100%.
It's sort of like a band-aid to the problem.
Sirius is a really good guy.
He is.
Unless you're Snape. But I think this whole back and forth and stuff kind of makes Sirius look a little bit better. Because in Snape's worst memory, it looks like James and Sirius just were mean to him for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Which was kind of true, a little bit.
Well, but
they did kind of start it, and they didn't really like him in the beginning too. But it was back and it wasn't just they were that mean to him. We see it kind of progress.
I'm interested to see how it develops later on.
Right. Especially after Snape's worst memory.
Well,
Snape has nothing left to lose.
Well, I feel like by the time we get to Snape's worst memory, they're a lot meaner.
That's what I mean. It's like the beginning of it. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think Snape is going to be doing just as much mean pranks to them as they do to him. Where in the book, it just seems like James and Sirius were just jerks and Snape did nothing to deserve it. We're seeing that, well, it was a back and forth type thing.
According to this story, Anyway.
And I'm saying...
I also think that you can't write a... You can't write a story where the protagonists are 4 bullies and have them be the protagonists of the story. So I think in order for this to be successful, she has to make Snape do some of this stuff so they're not just like bullying.
You could totally, because Lupin's the protagonist. You could totally have them be just jerks. Well, we know Sirius isn't, just from what we know.
Right.
Even in the books, like, he's not a bad guy. Even though he was bad guy, he's not really bad guy.
I'm just saying Lupin is friends with them and he doesn't stop it. He sees all this terrible stuff happening. He doesn't stop it. He doesn't stand up to his friends. I'm just saying you have to, if you're gonna have somebody be the main character and your best friends are the 2 biggest jerks in the school, you have to have a reason why, or you have to have a, like, you can't just have the main characters be bullies.
Okay. But yeah, maybe Lupin should just order the audiobooks and use those magical headphones that Sirius has.
Do they have magical audiobooks?
Apparently they have magical headphones, though.
Listen,
so
I feel like
gotta-
I think that is the author taking some liberties, because I think that's a slippery slope with the headphones.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, I could see one of the wind-up record players, because it's a mechanical device. It's not an electric device. You know what I mean? But
headphones,
I don't know.
doesn't the alarm projects throughout the school, right? At the end of class?
The bell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it an actual bell, or like are there bells everywhere? Or how does it trigger? How does it know the time?
They have clocks. Clocks aren't electric.
I know, but there's bells all over.
Yeah.
And it's like a school bell. Well, at least in the movies it is.
Forget the movies. The movies don't count.
Saying that it might be some like sonorous spell that only projects the audio to certain devices. You know,
I'm just saying you're not gonna buy an audiobook. That's all I'm saying in a traditional sense. I don't know. But maybe
Yeah,
there's a
maybe.
spell that you could have to, like, have the book read itself to you in that way.
Yeah, maybe.
Like that kind of a thing.
Vocalist Bookus.
Yeah. Audius bookus. Read it to me-us.
BIBLIOBIBULIus.
Yeah, the headphones definitely wouldn't work. It just, yeah.
Yeah, the movies aren't canon. Fair enough.
No, they're not. Because stuff happens in the movies that definitely does not happen in the books.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff gets forgotten. So there's also that.
No, I know. I'm tempted to think that this not audiobook. Stuck on audiobook. This fan fiction is more canon than
The movies, in some ways, except for the headphones bit, apparently.
Yeah, we'll slip there.
Well, do we want to finish the next chapter? Do we have time?
I think we have time for one more chapter.
All right. Chapter 11, First Year. Birthdays, books, and the Beatles.
Nice.
The Beatles.
I mean, if they have Beatles music, why? They have to have audiobooks.
They have to have audio.
They had audiobooks in the 70s. Come on.
Dude, magic, though. All right, we'll get on that in a minute. Let's just see what happens first. Fortunately, Madame Pomfrey was able to undo the hex with a few flicks of her wand. Still, she lectured all of them on the misuse of dangerous magic. As if we all wanted to look like Bigfoot, James complained as they left the hospital wing, skin still tingling from the hair growth. It had to be Severus. He coated the sweets in one of his potions. I know it, Sirius seethed. Yeah, we all know it, mate, James replied.
Don't worry, we'll get him back.
I'm so sorry, Peter wailed for about the 100th time. I really thought they were from my mum.
It's fine, Peter. James patted his shoulder. Just wish you'd given them to us first thing on a Monday. Then we could have at least bunked off Transfiguration.
Maybe they were from his mom. Maybe Peter's mom just really doesn't like him.
I demand retribution, Sirius shouted, raising his wand dramatically. Remus laughed. James did too. And you shall have it, he replied, pushing his glasses back up on his nose. Patience is a virtue, Black. Vengeance like this takes time. Don't suppose you've got another brilliant idea, have you, Remus? Sorry. Remus shook his head. His heart was still pounding from the terror of it. If he'd seen Snape at that moment, he would have throttled him, never mind pranking him.
I'll help you, James, Peter piped up. I'll do everything. I won't be scared this time.
They were just turning the corner which led to Gryffindor Tower when somebody behind them called out, Sirius! All 4 boys turned. Sirius made a small shocked noise. It was Bellatrix Black. What do you want? He asked, looking down and scuffing his shoes on the flagstone floor. It was the most unserious posture imaginable, Remus thought. He also noticed that James stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with his friend.
Come here and address me properly,
the 7th year witch snapped in response. Sirius didn't move. Bellatrix withdrew her wand. Remus was shocked, and for the first time since he'd been at Hogwarts, he felt frightened. Come here, she said in a low voice, or I'll make you. And it won't be a childish little hair-growth charm, I promise. Sirius walked forward, shaking his head at James, who tried to follow. They all watched the cousins speaking in quiet voices at the end of the hallway for long, uncomfortable minutes. Sirius barely looked up from the ground the whole time. Finally, she patted him on the head, then turned on her heel and left. They all exhaled, relieved. Sirius walked back to them shakily. In silence, they all entered the portrait hole and sat down at their usual sofa. All right, Sirius? James asked first. Yeah, he nodded, looking paler than usual. She wanted to invite me for tea on my birthday. I think my mum must have made her, probably held a family conference, trying to bring me back into the fold. Just because you're in a different house? And the company I'm keeping, he smirked at them all. So when's your birthday? 2 weeks, the 3rd. I've got to go to this tea, though. Bella's not joking about knowing some really vile curses. We'll do something afterwards, then. Something good, yeah? Remus and Peter nodded enthusiastically, but in the back of Remus's mind, he remembered that the 3rd was the night of the full moon. Sirius turned 12, and Remus wasn't there to celebrate it, though he didn't think anyone minded. James was Sirius's best friend after all, and Peter still liked to think that James belonged to him a little bit too, so Remus would have been the odd one out, even if he hadn't been locked away in a shack trying to rip himself apart. Madame Pomfrey tried him with a sleeping draught this time before the moon rose, but apparently it had no effect. What was worse, he managed to give himself his biggest scar yet, right across his back. Pomfrey made him stay in the hospital wing all day afterward, which was actually fortuitous. It meant he could just tell his friends he'd taken suddenly ill. They were still a bit confused as to why he hadn't told them anything about feeling sick beforehand, but went along with it. They probably thought he was fairly odd, and by now accepted almost anything he told them. He wouldn't have enjoyed the birthday. James talked to Madame Hooch and arranged a lunchtime flying lesson for the 3 of them. After dinner, before Sirius had to go and change for tea with his cousins, James and Peter had led the Gryffindor table in a round of happy birthday, followed by For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. According to the students Remus heard from afterwards, they had sung And So Say All of Us over and over, getting louder and louder until Professor McGonagall had to threaten them with detention if they didn't stop. As November marched on, the days grew shorter and the castle darker. They spent less of their time outside and more of it huddled by the fire in the common room, playing card games and plotting revenge against Snape. The first term was drawing to a close, and the teachers seemed to be piling on more homework than ever. Whenever Sirius and Remus were away from Peter and James, usually when the other 2 were in the library, Sirius was reading to him.
They finished A History of Magic in just under 2 weeks, and then alternated between A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration and Magical Drafts and Potions for the rest of term. When the Marauders worked on their homework as a group, he even took to reading aloud as if to himself, claiming it helped him think. This was very much to James's annoyance, who preferred silence. Though they couldn't possibly cover the entire syllabus in such a short time, to everyone's amazement, including his own, Remus's marks were improving at an astonishing rate. Sirius had apparently had the right idea. Remus's ability to recall and retain information was remarkable, and he found himself raising his hand in lessons for the first time in his life. Sirius's marks, on the other hand, began to fall. He spent so much time trying to secretly assist Remus that he apparently no longer did any of the extra reading he'd prided himself in all year. As it was, his own homework became average, passable, and fell behind James's for the first time. James was oblivious, of course, and merely assumed that he was actually improving.
"But you spend so much time in the library,"
Remus whispered to him once after Sirius received an acceptable mark on his charms essay.
"I thought you were studying."
Remus himself had still not worked up the courage to visit the library. The thought of all those books horrified him.
"I am studying,"
Sirius replied cheerily.
"Just not this stuff."
He folded the essay away.
"I'm looking up cognitive interpretation spells. So you can read by yourself. It's really tricky. OWL level, actually, but I think I've almost got it. Don't worry, Lupin, it's not as if I'm failing. This is much more interesting anyway."
Remus felt horribly guilty, of course, as well as mildly ashamed that Sirius was devoting so much time to helping him. He honestly couldn't remember a time in his life that anyone had tried so hard on his behalf. It made him wish he could do something, anything, in return. But other than having a difficult family, Sirius Black seemed to want for nothing at all. In fact, there was one thing Remus could give Sirius which even James could not, but it hardly felt worth mentioning. Something Sirius called Muggle Insight. It began when Remus finally plucked up the courage to ask about Sirius's record collection. Sirius was only too happy to share. Other than his racing broom, which was still at home, his albums were his dearest possessions. Remus could easily see why. He had Introducing the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night, and Help, as well as Abbey Road, Beggar's Banquet, and Sticky Fingers.
"Mick Jagger has to be the coolest Muggle I've ever seen,"
Sirius gushed. 2 Led Zeppelin albums. Remus hadn't listened to them before, but the older boys at St. Edmund's were all obsessed, and a Simon and Garfunkel LP hidden at the back. Wizards, it turned out, did not generally think much of Muggle music. All of Sirius's records had been gifted to him by his cousin Andromeda, who was apparently the first black sheep of the Black family, having left school a few years beforehand and married a Muggle.
"I hardly ever see her,"
Sirius explained.
"Not since the wedding, but she posts these to me every now and then. She sends them the Muggle way so Mum doesn't find out. She doesn't understand how the post office works."
So although he had an impressive collection by any 11-year-old standards, Sirius' musical passions existed almost entirely in a vacuum. He wasn't aware of any other Beatles songs other than the ones he already had, pressed into vinyl. He'd never listened to the radio or watched Top of the Pops or opened a copy of NME before. As such, he found Remus endlessly fascinating on the subject of music and Muggle culture.
"You've actually seen them, though?" he said, awed. "Seen them performing?" "Not in real life or anything," Remus replied uncomfortably. "No, I know. On the telephone."
Sirius nodded sagely. Remus stifled laughter.
"On the television," he corrected. "It's more like those moving paintings you lot have, only black and white, and only the Beatles. The Stones came on once and Matron made us turn it off because of their hair." "What about their hair?" "Too long," Remus shrugged. "She said they looked dirty." "My hair's much longer," Sirius said, frowning. "Yeah, it is, but Muggle boys don't have long hair. Not normally."
"Don't tell him that, he'll shave his head," Peter teased. He threw a gobstone across the board on the floor. They'd been playing a lazy game off and on for the past few days, trying to teach Remus the rules. It rolled onto one of Sirius's stones and knocked it out of the ring, immediately squirting out a disgusting-smelling liquid, which Sirius barely dodged in time. Peter grinned.
"Ha! Take that, muggle lover! Sirius swore loudly and left to change his clothes.
Yes. Sirius is this weird combination of Arthur Weasley and Hermione.
He is, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spending all his time in the library. But he's spending all his time in the library to help out Lupin.
Yep.
What a good guy.
What a good guy. What a nice friend.
Right?
He is doggedly loyal.
At first, I thought he was going to be researching Animagi,
Oh,
but not quite yet.
not quite there yet.
Probably after he finds out about Lupin's little secret.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You've seen them on the telephone. The Beatles.
Oh man, now I wish we had more scenes with Arthur and Sirius together.
Oh my
And
god.
the-
The first time Arthur probably ever saw that motorbike,
yeah.
he probably wet himself.
I have a car just like this.
Don't tell Molly I've got a car. Pam, what are you doing? Give her this, miss. Zip it. Okay, you fine.
Just go over there.
I want this one.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like Sirius and Arthur must have been like best friends, bonding over the Muggle stuff.
Right, all the
They're
Muggle
around
things.
Phoenix.
Well, I think Sirius's fascination is much more with like music and cars and girls and clothes and the look and all of that. And Arthur is like,
Well, I think it's everything. I think we've only seen that because that's really the only connection to the Muggle world he's had.
because I remember in the-
magazines and music. Arthur's had more freedom to explore it through the ministry, and
that's true. He gets to like play with all of it.
exactly.
And Sirius, I think,
Or-
has when Harry goes into Sirius's room, there's posters like Muggle bikini girl posters in
Yeah.
his room. Yep. Dispim.
Then Peter Pettigrew, Muggle lover.
I know.
You watch your mouth, you rat.
You.
And where was it? Yeah, Katie said when she said Peter piped up made me think of the Pied Piper and his rats.
Ah, yeah.
I wonder if
yeah.
that was a little one thrown in there. So we see all the references to like dogs with Sirius.
Yeah.
Are
Wonder if
there?
that was a little.
I haven't really been paying too much attention to Peter. Maybe there are some rat.
Some more references.
Yeah.
There could be. There might be. We don't know yet.
We really haven't had a good. She's like cross-eyed.
I know.
We really haven't had a good look at James. I've noticed, like he's kind of off doing his own thing.
Yeah.
He's just like, I want to go play Quidditch because I'm the best.
Yep.
And Lily Evans is pretty cool too.
Yep. And my hair is messy and I wear glasses.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But
Yeah. He squeaks a lot too. She says Peter squeaked.
yeah, that's true.
Maybe it'll say Peter scurried off. Maybe he
Maybe
will.
there'll be a point where Peter rats them out.
I don't know. What do you think, Bim? Just going from my girlfriend's house. We'll listen to your audiobook. Keep up the good work. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, stretch. Big stretch. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, this really is just Remus and Sirius. And Remus just constantly being like, look, I know James and Sirius are best friends. I know James and Sirius are best friends.
But me and Sirius have more than they do.
It's different. It's a A different kind of bond. I don't even know.
We have a Muggle connection, if you will.
Yeah, Muggle connection.
There's just the music between us.
I do appreciate the little trickle mentions of like his family members, like Bellatrix.
Yeah, Bellatrix sounds scary. Even in Hogwarts,
Yeah.
she sounds scary.
She probably was. I can imagine by the time she was 17, she was probably, pretty formidable and pretty freaky.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
It's bad seed, telling
Bad
you.
seed, yeah. And, I mean, Andromeda always was his favorite cousin. He says it in book 5.
Yeah. Because, luckily, his mother doesn't understand Muggle mail.
It's not all the young dudes, just the Sirius and Remus show.
Yeah. The two young dudes.
The two young dudes. I know, I wonder if we're gonna... develop more into the other relationship, the rest of the friendship. I mean, I wonder if this is just about establishing
their connection.
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah, I could definitely see that. It's just like, it's their thing,
Right. And you gotta kind of have these moments where they bond and connect with each other. You biting me! I hope that Peter isn't just a tag along too. I like so far he's kind of just been a tag along.
He's kind of like the comedic relief almost.
But
Pops in, says a few witty comments.
Yeah.
Or, just comments that are so utterly
Generic.
embarrassing that it's funny.
Yeah. I would like to see him actually have some character development. I would agree with that. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I guess Peter really doesn't develop, though. He kind of remains the same person because he's still that person when we meet him in the books.
But it would be nice to like get insight into at least who he is as a person, and I mean, they wouldn't just stay friends with him just because he's James's like neighbor. You know what I mean?
And like what kind of pushed him over the fence to the Death Eaters?
Right, and
when they were his friends.
Is it just so that he makes James look better? Yeah, see?
Maybe.
It just makes you, wonder why.
The Duff? The dumb, ugly, fat friend?
I think that's what Katie's insinuating here, yeah. I don't know. Was it really that? To just kind of be there, you make me look better, and also you're kind of like my alibi, like, look, we don't pick on everyone, look, we're friends with this kid.
Right. Or just, he worships me, so I like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of how James is.
Right.
He might be a bit of a narcissist.
Yeah, it's possible.
Maybe that's why we don't have a lot of James, because it's hard to make James look like the bad guy. He really is just kind of a narcissistic bully. The Sirius, we know, has that, like, good streak in him.
I read a theory that...
all his cockiness.
Well, I read a theory that, because a lot of people say, well, why Lily hated James so much, and James was obviously an arrogant tool bag, so why... why would Lily have ended up falling for him? Like, it's kind of silly to think that he would change just for her.
Mm-hmm.
And one theory is that he always played it up and acted up so much because he was trying to keep Sirius happy and keep Sirius entertained.
Oh.
And then once shit got really serious with the Wizarding War and this and that, he realized, like, yeah, that's... And after Sirius pulled that prank on Snape, where he almost got killed, like it made James kind of wake up a little bit that he needs to stop doing this stuff just to keep Sirius happy.
Yeah, maybe.
And Sirius was like no longer the most important person in his life. Like maybe James matured and realized like it's not just about making sure my best friend is happy, but like Voldemort is out and about and everybody's lives are at stake, and you know, maybe he kind of got it through his head like this is not gonna get me anywhere.
He grew up a bit
And
realizes it's not all about him.
And sometimes Sirius's idea of fun puts people in actual real danger.
Yeah.
Like Snape.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how the writer plays that whole thing out, where Sirius literally almost killed him and almost had his friend commit murder. Like, not only could Snape have died, but Lupin may have also unwittingly committed a murder.
Right? Imagine how Lupin would feel if he wakes up in a bloody massacre.
Right. Like, I think
told myself I'd cut back on the greasy food.
Like, they make James really look like he's the bad guy, but what if James is just reacting to Sirius, and James actually really isn't the bad guy? He's just like, he knows Sirius's life is garbage at home, and he's always just trying to keep him happy.
I guess so. I could.
It's just a theory. I'm not saying I buy it, but maybe that's what it is.
I feel like it could be a video in itself if we discuss all that. But we don't have time to discuss that today since
it's just about that time.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good explanation for why Lily would have ended up being interested. Because James maybe would have been able to pull back from that and grown from that. And yeah, I think you kind of get that in Snape's worst memory. Because James doesn't do anything until Sirius says he's bored.
Yeah.
Otherwise, maybe that incident may never have occurred. If Sirius hadn't said something, maybe James would have just left him alone. I don't know. Just a thought. Peter is the neighbor's kid you hang out with because your parents make you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Be nice to him.
Yep. Pretty sure that's how everyone treats Neville. Gotta be nice to Neville. Poor bastard.
Yeah. Until the end.
Until the end.
Then everyone's like, yeah, he's my friend.
Yeah,
I've known him since first year.
Yeah. We were in potions class together. Yeah. I remember.
I was there when he melted his first cauldron. I was there before the sword.
I was there when Professor Snape almost killed his toad.
Oh man, it pains me that Snape died before he could see Neville do that. I would have loved to see Snape's reaction
to Neville pulling out the sword and chopping off Nagini's head. Yeah.
Longbottom?
Or as they say in the musical, Schlongbottom.
Neville's awesome.
Neville's
God.
I feel like Neville really is your favorite character.
He really is. I would have loved to see Snape's reaction too. So we'll end it on what's the next chapter?
Oh, sorry guys. The next chapter is called The Best Glow Up. It literally is the best ever. Best I've ever read. Hands down.
Oh, yeah.
Best ever. Although Danny's is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't seen the end of Sansa either. She could be up there with Neville.
She could be up there with Neville. That's true. She's kind of on par with Neville. We just don't know where it's going.
Yeah. She's on par with book 1 and 2 Neville right now.
I don't know. I feel like end of book 1 Danny is pretty awesome.
Yeah. But okay.
Anyway,
chapter.
Yeah. Next chapter is called Christmas, 1971.
Ooh. Oh, maybe we'll get to see Slughorn in his Christmas pajamas now.
Ooh, maybe, yeah. Maybe someone will get poisoned and they'll have to go to Slughorn's office.
Think Slughorn in some silk green pajamas and
Emerald silky green jammy jams.
and a Santa hat.
Yeah.
He likes to pretend to be Santa for the kids.
Maybe.
That's what he does on his holidays.
Pretends to be Santa for the kids. He dresses up. That's cute. I like that.
Does magic for the Muggle kids.
I feel like he would get so much trouble for that. Yes, Katie, get excited for the final chapter of Game of Thrones because it's awesome. Best chapter in the whole book.
I actually finished reading them. We just need to discuss them and put them together and put them up.
Yeah.
So very soon.
Yep. We'll get them out. We're working on them.
Slughorn, belly full of jelly. Or bowl full of jelly.
Belly like a bowl full of jelly. Yeah.
On that note, it's that time, isn't it?
It is about that time. It's about 5 o'clock and...
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We learned a lot about Lupin. He has dyslexia. Sirius Black is a great guy who helps him out with that. And Lupin is quite honestly a genius. Has a photographic memory.
Yeah, Lupin's got quite a nice brain.
Yeah.
Quite a good brain.
And on that note, we will see you guys next time. Take care, everyone.
Yes, see you soon.
Have a fantastic weekend.
We'll see you Thursday.
Yeah.
For our next live stream.